Welcome to Let's Talk Death, conversations to inform and inspire. Let's Talk Death is a series of conversations with some amazing people from various fields. Our goal through these conversations is to normalize, educate, and demystify the taboo around death, dying, and the journey of grief. Hello, welcome to this episode of Let's Talk Death. I'm Fran Solomon.
And I'm Andy McNeil.
And we are thrilled to be your hosts for these conversations. Let's Talk Death is brought to you by Heal Grief, a social support network creating community after someone has died. Everything we do is inspired by our core belief that no one should ever grieve alone.
Our goal with this program is to have a friendly chat with some amazing people so we can help normalize and educate our Heal Grief community. Our guest today is Raymond Moody. Raymond is an MD with a Ph.D. in philosophy focused on unintelligibility. Throughout his 5-decade career, he has explored themes related to the transpersonal aspects of death, dying, and grief. Today, Raymond is known as the leading authority on near-death experiences. Founder of the Life After Life Institute in 1975, Raymond coined the term near-death experience, life after life, and has launched and has lectured on the topic worldwide. He's a counselor in private practice, and Raymond received his medical degree from the College of Georgia and his PhD from the University of Virginia. He has appeared on many programs, including Today and Turning Point. Raymond, we are delighted to have you as a guest on our show.
Well, I am just, beyond words. I don't know how to thank you all for this. And thank you so much for what y'all do, because I've been a grief counselor for a long period of time. And honest to goodness, you all understand what I mean. Thank you for what you guys do.
Thank you so much. Raymond, before we speak about your work, was there a personal experience that led your interest into the afterlife?
I've been pretty much motivated since I was a kid by curiosity. Astronomy at first, realizing at the age of 7 that by looking through a telescope that I'd never know much of anything, which was okay. It's fun to try, right? But did not grow up in a religious setting. My dad was a medic in World War II in the Pacific Theater. Enough said, right? And so but I was just immune to that religious stuff, and the idea of an afterlife had never occurred to me. I thought my sense of it was that I learned from the cartoons about the angels and the gates. I thought it was literally a cartoon premise, and so in my first year of college at UVA studying philosophy, I immediately fell in with the philosophy department. And just within the first few days of college, reading Plato's Republic, I discovered that the man who instantly became my hero, Plato, thought that this was a reality and was the most important question of existence. And that that great book, The Republics, come right down at the end. It culminates in this rather startling near-death experience of a soldier who's believed dead, but he says he got out of his body and went through a passageway into another world. And I was startled by that. And I remember asking Professor Hammond, what's this all about? Oh, these early Greek philosophers, they studied these things. 3 years later, I happened to meet a Dr. George Ritchie who had such an experience. I heard it from him. And it just unfolded from there. I heard a lot of these as a philosophy professor. I heard them from my students and colleagues. As a doctor, even more. So that's how it evolved. And I'm certainly my wiring is not set up to think about that there's an afterlife. To me, this is very counterintuitive. But where I've come is I give up. I can't think my way out of it.
That's it's all it sounds like it really was more you heard people's testimonies on things that you couldn't discount or ignore as
Yeah,
not part of the conversation about end of life.
that's right. I've heard this from thousands of people. And you know that the common way of thinking about this is the argument that was started with Plato and Democritus. Uh, and that basically, it's today it manifests as some people think, oh, this is indicator of an afterlife. Other people say today it's oxygen deprivation to the brain, right? It's like, and that argument goes back 2,300 years. But I've never taken that one seriously for two reasons. One having to do with the theory of mind in general, but also because I knew even when I was in medical school from one of my own professors that people who at the bedside of the dying, who are not themselves ill or injured, have the same experience that when it occurs to somebody who almost dies and returns, we call the near-death experience. And all of these things you hear, like getting out of the body and seeing a passageway, seeing apparitions of the deceased, occur to people at the bedside. Sometimes say, yeah, as grandma died, I lifted out of my body and I went part way toward this light. Or people say apparitions of the deceased's loved ones come into the room. And even most incredibly, hold on to your hats. I've had people tell me that at the scene of the death of someone else, they empathically co-live the dying life review of the person who passes away, which is common in near-death experiences. People say that as they're dying, they see everything they've ever done in sort of panorama. And I mean, I don't know what else to say. I mean, I know it's incredible, but it happens sometimes to the bystanders too.
Yeah.
So I mean, I give up. I have medical friends who medical judgment I trust 100%. Dr. Eben Alexander, the neurosurgeon, or my friend Dr. Anthony Chicoria, professor of orthopedic surgery, or Dr. O'Driscoll, Jeff O'Driscoll, who's an emergency room physician. All have had just absolutely extraordinary near-death experiences or shared experiences with patients in the emergency room, whatever.
So,
And they all tell me, yeah, not only is this real, it's more real than this ordinary waking reality.
so how far into this journey or research were you before you became a believer of this as opposed to a researcher on the subject?
I can't say that I am even now a believer. People really, they use that word belief. I like logic and epistemology. That's very vague, I believe. I don't know what they're talking about. It seems like some sort of active cohesion with others as well. In terms of, to me, it's belief. I mean, to me, it's given up. I mean, I can't think my way out. Now, in terms of the wonderful people that you serve in your group, this is the touching issue here is bereavement and grief, and it's a natural thing that when people have lost a loved one, is one of the common situations in which they turn to this question of life after death. People may go a whole lifetime through it, and then often in their 50s or 60s, they have a reflection period, like, I've been very successful in my life, but what lies ahead? Or people who've lost a loved one, who are faced with terminal illness. And what they want to know from all of this is not what I could teach them as a professor of logic and philosophy of language and epistemology, but they want to know, it's like, what does this sort of come down to? And folks, it is that it looks to me, I mean, I gather that there is a life after death.
I think people want to know that death is not an ending.
Yeah, they do. They do.
And
And not just for themselves, but,
yeah,
for their for bereavement for
Their
loved ones.
person, yeah, their
for
person.
But
for their
Andy,
person. You know,
yeah,
it's interesting. I was with a group this last weekend, actually at a TAPS event, and was presenting on dealing with difficult emotions after grief, and then also did a session on spirituality and grief, just talking about that component. And it does seem to me that people want to believe those things, but here's what I've also witnessed, and I'm sure you've probably seen the same thing, is that even if a person has a belief that there's an afterlife, they still grieve. It doesn't
yes,
change the
yes,
pain of your
yes,
loss. And that's,
yes,
one of the slides that I put up is that people with beliefs still grieve.
that
Grief
is
and
so
belief
correct,
can
Andy.
coexist,
That is so
and
right.
it's just again, I've sat with hundreds of people who are very religious or very
I
spiritual or
agree with
believe,
you
and
entirely.
they have just as much pain as a person who doesn't. It's very
And
interesting.
Andy, I've talked with literally thousands of people, literally, I mean, this is no exaggeration, going back to
Yeah,
1965, who,
yeah,
a cardiac arrest, they went over to the other side from their point of view. And they
right.
are absolutely certain that there is a life after death. But guess what? When they lose a loved one,
Yeah,
they go through grief too. And it's
right.
like they say, I've heard, it's one guy years ago, he told me, Raymond, this makes grief even worse. He said, because, if you're just thinking of it in a religious term, oh, I'm not going to feel bad about grandma because I got my religious beliefs to hold on to. I mean, that's just kind of running away from the situation. And it's by rationalization, right? But this guy was saying, I can't rationalize it, right? Because I mean, it's not a matter of, some religion, it's a matter, I've been there. But even then, people say it makes what this guy said, it makes grief even more acute because you can't use the religion thing as a shield or a way to
Yeah,
get around to. You have to face the feelings and so on.
yeah,
And the feelings and the grief is really the absence of one's presence in their life. We have a saying here at Heal Grief: the deeper the love, the deeper the grief. So that doesn't go away. I think, though, that there is perhaps a shift, not that grief is lessened by any means, but that there is perhaps a shift when one might embrace the idea that death is not necessarily an ending.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of comfort in there. At least that's the experience that I've heard through the people that we've worked with. Andy, would you disagree with that?
I don't disagree with it. I guess for me, I talk more about the degree of the pain, like
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
depth of pain, the depth of loss. I just have not seen that belief replace that depth. And then I know people who, are professed to be atheists, and they are dealing with their grief and coping in ways that sometimes people who have strong beliefs about the afterlife don't have. So I think I've seen the gamut of it, and I'm not discounting that a belief in the afterlife is something that can be helpful and sustaining to someone in their life, but it does not
In their grief.
discount their ability to be in pain and or to even make choices that cause them to suffer further in their grief.
Exactly.
Yeah,
It can be used as a way of rationalization and denial. And it's the way I say everybody goes through grief in a loss. It's just universal. And
yeah.
there is a way of using religion as a way not to face those feelings.
Yeah.
Raymond,
Or
let's
to experience guilt because you feel like if I really believed this, I wouldn't feel so bad. You know, I've heard that as well, where people kind of beat themselves up a little bit because they are grieving, because I shouldn't grieve. That means maybe I really don't believe if I grieve. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very complex. I'm so glad my parents didn't inflict that stuff on me. I tell you, I mean, I'm not against God. I tell you, I talk to God every day, but he's never said a word to me about religion. So, you know, I just,
Raymond, let's talk about your most recent book, Proof of Life After Life,
mm-hmm.
7 Reasons to Believe in the Afterlife.
Yeah. Well, that comes from a lot. It's a startling title, right? Proof of life.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that very advisedly. The publisher suggested the title, and I got to thinking, and I say, okay, I'm ready at age 79 to say that. As long as I can say the background information that I was professor of logic. I know the history of the notion of proof. I know how the notion of proof developed in philosophy and Western thought. And what I've found in the years that people come to me and they ask me all the time, Raymond, do you have any proof? But these people have lost a loved one, right? Or are facing terminal illness themselves. And so I quickly found that if I start talking about, well, Aristotle said this, and Gödel had the incompleteness theorem, and proof is this and that, you know, it doesn't help people. But they want that word proof. They really, people want to know. And so what I've come up with, I can say with feeling and, you know, complete confidence is that it is for folks who are wondering and you know, their fear and so on, and worrying about where their deceased loved ones were. What I can say from like 50 something years of thinking about this and trying every way I can to think my way out of it is that, yeah, I gather there is an afterlife and that it is a rational thing for somebody to expect that there is. And so if you know you're inclined to think that, don't let people knock you down on the basis of some. It's like my thought after all these years is that, oh my goodness, this is. And it still starts.
Yeah.
And it gives us even more reason and inspiration, I think, to go on living here. And because the folks over the years who've attempted suicide and then had a near-death experience have universally said, you know, it's looking back, they would people say, I would never attempt it again. Not that they felt like they were going to go into some sort of hell, but rather that they learned that, you know, even in when times are tough, that there is a meaning to go on living.
Yeah. Well, Raymond, we're actually close to the end of our time. It's funny how quick the conversations go.
Yeah.
And this has been a very, very good one. I was looking forward to it, and the conversation did not let me down. But before we end our time together, our viewers often want to know how they can connect with our guests. And if someone wanted to connect with you or your work or your books, how would they go about doing that?
Well, my website is lifeafterlife.com, and there's ways to get in touch with me on there. And the new book, as you mentioned, is Proof of Life After Life. It just came out with Simon and Schuster. And in terms of the folks listening in, I mean, I just want to say, I've been through there where you are too. I lost my first child in 1970, age of 36. You never get over it, but life is a process. You know, you grow bigger around the grief. It's a hard process to describe. But thank you, folks, for listening in, and I hope, you know, something I've said today has been helpful to you.
Raymond, thank you so much for being a guest here at Let's Talk Death and for sharing your journey and the inspiration behind your work.
Thank you.
And thank you to those joining us for this episode of Let's Talk Death. If you would like to learn more about Heal Grief, please visit us at healgrief.org. At healgrief.org, you can learn more about all of the programs and resources at Heal Grief, including our network of support for grieving young adults called Actively Moving Forward.
And if you know of a bereaved adult, refer them to our AMF app, where adults of all ages connect with others experiencing a similar death loss. And last, make sure to sign up on healgrief.org to receive our newsletter for links to future episodes of Let's Talk Death.
And so again, thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time on Let's Talk Death.